Welcome to the Carbonsations podcast, where we speak to some of the leading figures in the emerging carbon industry. We're joined today by Max DubBuisson, Vice President of Sustainability Policy and Engagement at Indigo Ag, a Massachusetts-based provider of sustainable agriculture solutions. Max, thank you so much for joining us on this episode, especially today. I know you're on a very tight schedule, so we'll try and keep things to the point. Before we dive into all the exciting work that Indigo is doing, can we get a little bit more of your backstory and what you used to do before joining Indigo Ag?
Sure. And thanks for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity and looking forward to the conversation. So, in terms of academics, I studied biology and was sort of a ecosystem and resource biology focus. And after a while, ended up going into a graduate program doing environmental management, corporate environmental management, and eco-entrepreneurship. And that's what really sort of set me on the course that I've ended up on. Spent a little time working in energy for a utility and wind power company, but then got into the carbon market. In 2008, I joined the Climate Action Reserve, which is a nonprofit standards body and offset registry based in California. And ended up working there for 11 years, spending a lot of time writing protocols, training verifiers, reviewing verification reports, providing guidance to project developers, and over time, just kind of getting deeper and deeper into both voluntary and compliance carbon markets. So did a lot of work in the early days of the California compliance market. They used our protocols there, and then did some work in the Canadian provincial climate protocols. And then around, I'd say 2019, I was sort of interested in trying something different, getting out of, been in that role for 11 years and was interested in kind of sitting in a different side of the table, so to speak. And at the same time, there was a lot of interest building around soil carbon and agriculture, and a number of different groups had been coming to me to develop ag soil carbon protocols. And it was something that we had tried at the reserve around 2010 to do a cropland management protocol, and at that time decided that the barriers were sort of insurmountable. But a lot more science had happened, a lot more research had been done, and there had been a lot of movement on things like models and data collection. So I saw what Indigo was doing, building a carbon team, putting a lot of resources and a lot of brain power in-house behind scaling up ag carbon quickly and with a high level of scientific rigor. And I thought it was very exciting. So that was 4 years ago that I joined, and immediately started on writing methodologies, and then have since been developing projects.
Oh, that's fascinating. Thank you. So moving on to Indigo's work, I'm very curious as to learn the details of the business model. So it would be great if you could share more about like the company's products, solutions, such as your biologicals. I'm particularly curious about those, and how that all ties into your carbon farming program, the Carbon by Indigo program.
Absolutely. So we do have sort of a physical and digital product offerings, and the physical product, our biologicals, biotrinsics, was kind of where we started around 2013, 2014. And these are naturally occurring soil microbes, and the team developed a really thorough sort of pipeline process for evaluating the microbes that are out there in the field, what microbes are giving which crops some sort of advantage under certain stress conditions. So pest or drought or heat, whatever it may be, there are different microbes that are already out there, sort of like, we take probiotics. It's the same idea, understanding which microbes are helping, and then of those, which ones can be reliably cultured and turned into a shelf-stable product, typically applied as a seed coating. So we're not a seed company. We'll put the coating on other company seeds, but it's been very successful business. It's a global business. So we're in the US, South America, Europe, India, and have, different products available in different areas. But along those lines, some of these microbes, help the crops perform well in ways that sometimes you can then maybe reduce your fertilizer input. And if you do that, you'll have lower nitrous oxide emissions. So started looking into that, started engaging farmers in around 2018, 2019 in the sustainability and the greenhouse gas emissions and seeing what we could do there. And in 2019 was when we launched the Carbon by Indigo business. And as I said, Indigo started engaging with registries to develop a new methodology. And so that business now has sort of two major components. It's carbon credits and sustainable supply chain. So you've got some companies that they actually have agricultural supply chains, and there's increasing pressure for them to not just buy carbon credits and use them as offsets, but actually to get into the scope 3 emissions in their supply chain and reduce them. And that can be very difficult due to both traceability of some crops in certain supply chains, but also the actual quantification of what's happening in the soil and the greenhouse gas fluxes. So from the farmer's perspective, they don't necessarily care if they're in a carbon program or if they're in a sustainable supply chain program. It kind of looks the same to them, right? They need to plant cover crops. They need to reduce tillage. They need to reduce their inputs. All these things are beneficial regardless of how you monetize it. So our programs are to engage with the farmers in a long-term way, but then we've built out the software and modeling and scientific infrastructure to sort of monetize those benefits in both of these different marketplaces.
Okay. And is there a specific registry that you work with or multiple registries?
Yeah, on the carbon side, we pursued both Verra and the Climate Action Reserve. So we developed a methodology called VM42 in the VCS program with Verra. And at the same time, the Reserve launched their soil enrichment protocol development process. So we participated in both of those. That was during in 2020. Both happened at the same time. And our U.S. project is listed with the Climate Action Reserve. So we've been verified 3 times now against the soil enrichment protocol. And then we have an EU project listed with Verra under VM42.
If we may, I'd like to also get a little bit more specifics into as to what it's like for farmers to enroll into the program itself. So first off, how easy is it for them to enroll? And once they have, what are the kind of changes or to their practices that they're expected to make? And does anyone from Indigo guide them on that decision?
Yeah, so what we've done is we've adopted a partnership model when it comes to enrolling and supporting growers. So in the early days, we were directly enrolling growers, but over time, we've built dozens of partnerships with other agricultural companies who already have relationships with the farmers. One of the biggest examples would be Corteva. So they're already supporting the farmers in terms of providing agronomic advice and retail sales of agronomic products. And so they can bring farmers in because the farmers are going to them and asking about carbon programs. And then on the back end, it all comes through our software platform. So it is a self-service platform. Growers can do it themselves. And in some cases, partners enroll for them. It can happen either way. They can edit their data. Their partners can input their data. We build connections to machine data sources. If they have farm management systems, we try to build connections there to sort of reduce that. So the actual process of enrolling, very easy. The farmers go in, they draw a boundary around their field. If they've already got a boundary, of course, stored with their partners, they can just upload those boundaries. And that kind of establishes the physical footprint. And then there's a carbon contract in there. We do a 5-year contract. So the growers are basically saying, I'm going to commit to changing one of my practices. On the carbon credit side, we're not prescriptive about what they have to change, but we do provide them with a carbon calculator that shows them what would the benefits be of different practice changes for their particular crop and their particular region. And we provide them a lot of feedback year over year of, here's how you performed. Here's, these fields we would recommend doing this. We've got some cover crop decision support tools, things like that. So we're building more of these digital tools rather than building up sort of a boots on the ground kind of force. And then, of course, we do a lot of training for our partners to help provide them that advice.
Okay. And as far as measuring soil carbon goes, is that a service that you provide, or are farmers expected to measure that in some way and report to you?
Yeah, basically their obligation is managing the farm. And so we do everything related to carbon. So we bring in the verification body during the verification each year, And we also do all the soil carbon measurement. So there is both a physical soil sampling component as well as a modeling component. So the soil sampling, not every field gets sampled. It's a statistical sort of census-based approach, and we're selecting different fields randomly and then selecting random points within fields. So every year, typically in the spring before the spring planting happens, we're out there taking thousands and thousands of soil samples that then go to a laboratory for analysis. And then those soil samples become basically the initialization point for running the model. So Descent CR is the model that we run. We have the exclusive commercial license to Descent, and we take that soil sample, and that's basically the starting point. And so then we're modeling both the baseline and project scenario year over year to see the difference between the two. And then we do go back and remeasure. So every 5 years, we take new soil samples.
Excellent. Thank you. I know that recently Indigo set a new record with its third carbon crop with over 160,000 issued carbon credits. So congratulations on that, first of all. And I'd also like to use this milestone as an opportunity to get your take on how you see carbon farming developing in recent years, as far as like enrollment goes, as far as farmer interest goes, and also in terms of support from policymakers in the U.S.
It's amazing how much it's exploded since I joined Indigo. There was a real turning point there. I think there's a lot of interest from the farmers themselves. There's also a lot of confusion from the farmers because so much has happened, right? So many carbon programs starting up. They all kind of sound the same in some ways, but then different in other ways. And there's different payment models because we're still in that sort of nascent phase from the market side of things, of which approach is sort of going to be the best for the farmers long term. At the same time, there's been an incredible amount of support coming out of the federal government, but not in the way that the Europeans are approaching things. So it's much more putting funding out there and kind of from the bottom up, essentially more voluntary focus rather than a top-down, creation of a compliance market or something. So in Europe, we see the carbon removal certification framework. In the US, the political environment's not such that we would see something like that coming out of the government. But we do have the Inflation Reduction Act put huge amounts of money out there. The USDA has been funding these climate smart commodity partnerships grants that are stimulating a lot of research and a lot of sort of testing and piloting of different ideas. And then there's the Growing Climate Solutions Act, which ended up making its way into the budget bill last year, where the government will start to not create their own program and regulation, but more start to endorse the high quality programs and standards that are out there and provide a bit more of a centralized information source for farmers.
Okay, then maybe to broaden the previous question, since 2023 was a pretty difficult year for the voluntary carbon markets, how do you see the VCMs performing at the moment, and where do you see them headed throughout this year and beyond it as well?
Mm-hmm. I mean, from our corner of the market, things are going great. We're providing high quality nature-based carbon removals in a way that's also helping rural economies and getting farmers to transition. And so we've had no trouble selling the credits. We're still essentially supply constrained in that sense. But I do think the march towards higher quality, more transparency, I think these are going to be really good things for the carbon market. I've been participating in the ICBCM working groups, and I'm doing the agriculture category assessment and on their permanence working groups. And similarly, we're on the EU's carbon removal expert group. And it's been great to be a part of those conversations and see how, agriculture can change from, what it was 10, 15 years ago, which was some questionable, emission factors that were applied across large areas, to much more scientific and rigorous and transparent accounting approaches that buyers really like, and I think are going to stand up to the scrutiny.
And with that in mind, what's your opinion on the VCM's capacity to actually, help scale carbon farming moving forward?
I think it's monumental. I think Scope 3 and supply chain programs are going to be equally important. So I think we see buyers out there that don't have agricultural supply chains and are interested in high quality credits, don't have essentially scope 3 solutions. These are going to be credits that they really like to target. And I think once we have these quality labels and the ability to say, set these credits apart from others, I think it's going to be huge. If you look at the number of projects in the VCS pipeline under VM42, I think there's something like 115, 120 now. So there's a lot of people trying a lot of things in a lot of different parts of the world. And it's really exciting to see, how it's going to scale up. What we've seen with our project is that the combination of using partners to engage with the farmers, using software for the data collection, and using software for the quantification is that it's been able to scale up quickly. So with each of our verifications, these last 3 verifications, it's essentially the same system that we're tweaking and fine-tuning and improving. We haven't had to scrap the whole thing and rebuild and take a different approach. But in the meantime, we're processing many times more farmers and acres through that system each year. So it's absolutely possible when you aggregate in this way.
And circling back to what you said about supply constraint, how do you believe that issue is solvable?
So we've got the acres, and I think it's a journey for the farmers, right? It's not like an industrial project type where you say, okay, we're going to do a project, and then you install a piece of equipment and flip a switch and you go from 0 to 60, right? You go just start producing emission reductions. It's more of a journey for the farmers of getting into the program, getting comfortable with the type of changes that are going to be made. Some farmers start with just one field, or they start with, an easier change to kind of see how they feel about it. And we do see, we talk about what we call the effect size, the number of tons per acre per year that are being reduced or removed on the fields. And so certain practices have a low effect size at first. And this is, one of the things about having a very accurate picture of what's going on. If you transition to no-till, it might be a slow start, and then it takes off. So there's some practices that are really going to shoot up. And as the farmers see those checks increasing, they'll start adopting more practices. They'll start bringing in more fields, and we'll see more farmers. So I think there's some component there. And then, some of them are sitting on the sideline saying, I don't know, there's too many programs, is it the right time to get in? And so, I think as we've been able to bring together both the carbon credits and supply chain, that's helping reduce that anxiety on their part, because they want to not jeopardize their participation in one program by joining another. We're enabling them to do both, not at the same time, but within one program. And then, I think as we see the U.S. government putting out more information and the, ICBCM labels coming out, we're just going to get more and more clarity, more incremental clarity in the marketplace.
Okay. And are there particular practices that you see are more successful than others, for example, or that farmers prefer more over others?
Yeah. So it is location dependent. It's cropping system dependent. In a large portion of the U.S., cover crops is really the winner. It's a good way to get a lot of carbon flowing quickly, just keeping living roots in the soil for longer during the year. So if they've got a period, if they're leaving the land fallow for a period and they plant the cover crop, it's incredibly impactful and it happens pretty quickly. Adding legumes can also be effective. And then tillage reductions are, in some cases, more regionally dependent. Some places it's very impactful. Other places it can take a longer period of time. And then when we look in, there's some particular systems like rice systems, for example, changing to alternate wetting and drying can dramatically decrease methane emissions. So completely different sort of system. And then there will be some good opportunities to reduce nitrous oxide emissions in the future. That can be something that feels risky to farmers to reduce their fertilizer application. So it needs to be done in a way that they can see that they're not getting any decline in their yields.
I realize that this might be too early to ask this question, but are there instances of farmers dropping out of the program?
We've only seen one or two unenroll from the program, and it's not necessarily because they're not interested in carbon farming. It might be that another program seemed more attractive to them. Like I said, different ag carbon programs are coming out with different payment structures and different contract structures. So some farmers may prefer a different type of program. We've seen some who maybe they struggled to get through the data collection. Doesn't mean that their field is out. It means that they don't make it into the next verification. But we continue to monitor those fields remotely, and we continue to engage with that farmer to get them back on track, get them through the data collection again. So one of the nice things about this aggregated approach is that kind of flexibility, being able to basically have a different population of fields slightly differently, each year, and enrolling new fields. So we're not seeing, any widespread farmers just reverting back to old practices or anything like that.
What would get in the way of data collection?
Farming is the first thing that gets in the way of data collection. So first and foremost, they're farmers. The way we like to talk about it is, in the fall, you harvest your cash crop, and then now it's time to sit down at your computer and harvest your carbon crop. But also in the winter is their time off. So we're competing with, maybe they taking family vacations or getting ready, doing their planning for the next season. It's something that we work on reducing that burden. We're bringing in additional remote sensing capabilities to help sort of both validate the data that they are entering, but also be able to suggest to them, like, hey, here's what we think we already know about, last year's cultivation cycle. Can you confirm and fill in the gaps? Some of it's just getting used to it and learning what's involved. The feedback that we do hear, though, from farmers who are in year over year is that it has gotten easier every year. So usually the first year is the most effort, because that's when we also need historical data. We need to know what they were doing before they changed their practices so that we know how to set their baseline.
Okay. Thank you so much for getting into the details. So
yeah, where I live.
So for my last question before we finish up here, I'd like to circle back to Indigo and ask what the company has planned for the upcoming weeks, months, years maybe, and are there any interesting new developments that we should be on the lookout for?
Sure. Well, no rest for the weary after Carbon Crop 3. We're already running hard on Carbon Crop 4. So data collection is wrapping up now, and we're looking at soil sampling coming, and then verification starting again in the summer. So very excited about that. Scaling up our sustainable supply chain solutions. We've been doing some programs in cotton and rice, and we're continuing those. Those have been getting bigger and bigger over the last, I think, 5 years. But we're going to be expanding into additional crops, helping out additional supply chains. So we're engaging across food, feed, apparel, biofuels, all the different industries that need this sort of data and quantification. So excited to see those scale up. And then just continuing our scientific research and publications. So we're trying to communicate as much as possible about what we're doing and about agriculture as a climate solution, how it works. I'll be heading out to the airport soon to fly to San Francisco for the North American Carbon World Conference, and we'll be doing some workshops and panels there to kind of share our experience.
Excellent. Max, I know you're in a hurry to catch that flight right after this, so I won't keep you any longer. Thank you so much for being on the show today, and all the best.
All right. Thanks, Violet. Great to talk with you.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Carbonsations podcast and would like to hear more conversations like this, please be sure to subscribe. We really appreciate the support.